Hey, what is up guys? I've been spending a bit of time in Wing 8, the new raid, enjoying myself. I've done it twice now, and this is basically a review slash mini guide almost for the raid. Spoiler alert, I'm not the best player, so everything I say is subject to probably change and scrutiny. So if I've done anything or said anything wrong, comments below please, and have a bit of grace. But I think I've locked down what the per group strat will be. So if you've never stepped into the raid, or you've gone in a few times and your groups haven't really got it, or you're in a prog group, this is kind of just a general overall, this should get you there and a kill kind of video. So first of all, let's talk about the aesthetics of the raid. It's kind of an open, you can use your mounts, everything. So it reminds me more of a DRM, like a Dragon Response mission. And it's more like Wing 7, where you have two bosses that you can choose to start with, which is also really nice because maybe you're struggling with one, you pop over to the other, give it a go, and then come back to the other one. Now, on the left side, you've got Decima. Decima is an extremely heavy mechanical fight. You've got specialized roles, and almost like if there's like one hiccup, it's kind of a bit of a wipe, if it's like in a way. And then on the other side, you've got Greer. Greer's completely ground and pound, just fun times. I think more just any group that just wants chaos, that's that sort of a fight. And then kind of the final boss, or I think it's Ura, whatever her name is, she's kind of a bit of a culmination of the two, where she's slightly mechanical, but it's not that heavily mechanical. As long as you respond quickly, you should be fine. So let's start off with the first fight, Decima on the left. Decima is extremely, like I said, quite mechanical fight. You'll need specialized role. So you're going to need 5 people that will be at range pretty much most of the fight. This is your ranged group, and then you'll have 5 people that are staying in melee range most of the time. Although you don't have to play melee, if that makes sense. It might even be nice to be slightly ranged. So if one of the ranged people die, you can pop over and help them so that you don't have to reset the raid, you know, and kind of cause a wipe every single time. Because chances are if a ranged person dies, it's not fun. Out of the group, of the range group, you're going to need one person who's the kiter. In my opinion, this is probably going to be your more experienced player, because they're basically in charge of making sure that the one-shot in arrows are dealt with. So I was in 2 different raid groups that killed this boss, and they approached the fight very differently. So it's given me good perspective of different tactics. So I'm going to talk about both of them. But no matter what you choose, the first bit of the fight is the same. From 100% to 75%, it's basically just DPS and trying not to get hit by things. The kiter still does their mechanics. So from 100% to 75%, the kiter is the furthest person away, and they will basically be targeted by an arrow. The arrow can either be yellow, which is kind of, or orange, which is kind of a safe arrow. They need to just eat this arrow and aim it at none of the pylons. You do not want to charge pylons unnecessarily. Then they want to aim the red arrow at a pylon and hide behind it, because otherwise they'll die. That's a one-shotter. The only tip I could give to any kiter that wants to do it is get out early, get your damn pylon, and don't move at the last second. Because I had a couple of times where, you know, we would stack in to do things, or, you know, trying to find positions, and then the person would move later on and basically kill a whole bunch of people, because, you know, you can't move in a split second when a red arrow is on you. Now, as for the rest of the group, and in general of the entire fight, the attack patterns are the same. The boss will basically strike, I believe, maybe their left and then their right, or their right and their left, I'm not sure which one. This attack doesn't do that much damage, so you can eat this attack, right? I'm talking about your dodges, because basically the boss will go side to side. They'll do a massive circular slam in the middle. Now, if you're at the edge, you can kind of just step out of this, but if you're not at the edge and you're inside, you might want to dodge this. It's just like medium damage. Then after that attack, the boss will do a Deimos pizza slice, which basically means he'll strike in the front, and the shock waves will kind of move in pizza slices out to the back. So don't dodge immediately as you see the boss slam if you're like at the back. And what I like to do is dodge towards the sides that like basically have already had their pizza like done, right? That attack needs to either be dodged or aegis, because it is big damage. Like it can do, I don't know, like 80-70% of your health. It is pretty big attack. And then every now and then you'll see the boss jump up, and you'll kind of see like rings going outwards and a one-shotter in the middle. Obviously, it doesn't matter if you're dodging or whatever. If you're in the one-shotter, you're dead, basically. This can be aegis, stabbed, or you can just dodge. Now, later on in the fight, you'll see that I have stability, and I basically was in charge, or I made myself in charge of using stability for this, because you don't want to lose positioning in this fight. You need to deal with mechanics if you're the range group or the kiter, and so having stability for knockbacks or pushes is very high. A lot of groups even run with 2 stability givers, one for wins and one for knockbacks. Now you can decide whether you want to do that for the range group or the melee group or whatever you want to do, or you can just dodge and just no one can bring these things. It's kind of safer for pugs in a sense if you have, training wheels. Now at 75%, and this is the part where you need to correct me if I'm wrong, the boss gets a break bar, and this is something you should break very quickly. I'm not sure if it's timed wise, that if you take too long, he gets the bar again, or if it's when one of the greens get into him that it replenishes. But basically, his break bar can replenish. So you want to break it quickly. So what I did is I burst my Domi signet. I know people will probably slap me and be like, DPS loss, what are you doing? But for me, it was like, I'd rather just break this damn thing quickly and then catch greens. Basically, you'll notice that the moment the red circle around the boss, like there's like a mini squiggly red line around the boss, goes away, anyone can catch greens basically, because that's around the CC bar. So as soon as the CC bar is active, you can CC and catch green. So even if you were the person getting hit by the arrows, you can catch green. I shouldn't have explained this before. The person who gets hit by the arrows, whether the kiter or the range group later on, you can't stop greens because you take extraordinarily high damage from greens. So what I'm trying to say is once that squiggly line's gone and the CC bar is active, even if you were the person hit by those, those orange arrows, you could still catch greens. So you need to help catch greens. You'll see that some require 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. And that's the amount I believe that you've charged the pylons create bigger greens. So obviously if you've stuffed up mechanics, you'll have large greens, and that requires multiple people to stop. Now, also what I want to say is, a lot of the times the greens will seem to come from one direction, but don't get like too complacent. All of a sudden, 2 greens might just come from the back of the boss where like no one was really stacked. Just keep an eye open, because the amount of greens that the boss absorbs in this break bar phase buff him up to do a massive attack. Now, in general, obviously, greens that get through to the boss buff up the damage, and I believe if he gets 10, it's a group wipe. But in this case, you need to stop the greens because the boss is charging up a massive attack. Now this attack scales on the amount of greens he's absorbed, and it kind of, you can barrier, and I've noticed the damage doesn't go all at once, it kind of ramps up. So if you are, want to use your heal skill while the damage is ramping up, you can kind of try survive it if it would have downed you or killed you in general. You might go down state, that's fine, just res up, and this is a big DPS window. You can actually stack condis on the boss while the CC bar kind of, while you're catching greens, things happening, because they're basically, once the CC bar and this phase is broken and the boss falls down, you can get a nice DPS window. Now once the boss has fallen down, phase 2 of the fight starts, and this is where the range group will branch off. So the kiter still needs to be further than the range group, and the range group needs to peel off with the boss. Notice I spoke about that squiggly line before. The range group should just be out of the squiggly line, because you take higher damage if you're inside of the squiggly line and you're basically eating arrows. So you've guessed it, the range group is eating arrows. The kiter will always have the further arrow because it has a chance to be the red one-shot arrow. So the kiter still wants to grab the red arrow so that they can hide and basically not kill people. Now the range group, there's 2 choices. You can either go all on top of each other from 75 to I think 40%, or you can go shoulder to shoulder. Now my first group, what we did is we all stacked up and we got healed through it. The healer in the melee group, the healer in the kiting group or the range group would basically just heal us through it, and you would basically, because all the arrows come one after another, so they're not that high damage, but they are quite a lot of damage. Now what we did as well in the first group is we would rotate like 30 to 45 degrees, so we would basically like eat and then start to move over and kind of go clockwise round the boss. And the reason being is because wherever the kiter is, there is a ranged attack that will kind of trigger a couple of pylons, so greens will generally come from where the kiter is, kiting in a sense. And also if some of the range group mess up or whatever and activate a pylon, we kind of move over, and then the melee group would also move in a clockwise position, therefore allowing them to, catch the greens. Now in the second group I was in, they weren't necessarily more experienced, but they used more experienced tactics, and they did DPS a lot harder than the other groups. So I call them almost like notch up, maybe just before like elite, if that makes sense. So their expectations were Melee group picks one spot, range group picks one spot, and the kiter basically goes and does all the mechanics, because the kiter can kind of bait where a lot of the greens are going to go, and also in the last phase they can bait another attack. So we basically had a marker, we all just stacked there, and we basically didn't ever stack on each other. We all went shoulder to shoulder, took personal responsibility, made sure we never hit a pylon, and we just kind of DPS'd in that sense, which was fine. I still brought stability just to make sure that, you know, we had stab for the knockback, and then I think the healer or someone else was basically providing stability to make sure that the winds never pushed us. There is a wind that can basically angle you ever so slightly, so you don't want to get kind of put out of place with the orange arrows and, you know, hit a pylon or something like that, or, you know, kind of get caught out and then all of a sudden you and another guy on top of each other and you get hit. Now, generally, the damage isn't that high that you can go two people on top of each other, but I still don't recommend it. Also just depends what your kite is, because if a kite is a healer and they're off doing something else, you might not get heals. If it's some random DPS and the healer is active and they know what's going on, it should be fine. But also, because we're going shoulder to shoulder, we're spreading. Like, a healer might not be able to, you know, some of the AoE heals might not be able to hit everyone, which is why some of the groups like to stack everybody on top. I personally prefer to spread even in the 75 to 40%, because then when you get to the 40 to you know, kill ratio, it doesn't matter, because you're used to the momentum of we don't stack, you know, because the fight changes in the last bit. Now, if you're in the range group, utilities that are good to bring, either DPS utilities, stability, Aegis utility, or like a blink or a, you know, personal movement thing. You know, pretend, say the kiter dies, maybe you want to have a blink so that, you know, stuff that I become the new kiter, and that way we don't need to, you know, reset or anything like that. Also, you'll notice that there are, like, you know, lasers, and those things act like basically a pinball. They'll just start knocking you around everywhere. So you can't obviously dodge through them, but if you have like a blink, you can blink through them. So having things like Sandswell, blink, you know, shift signet, things like that allow you to move through these things easily, especially if the kiter goes downstate. You know, you need to be able to get over there and go and raise them. Now, 40% again, CC bar, same thing. You CC the boss, catch greens, survive the ramped up, you know, big attack from the boss. Obviously, try not to let any greens through. And then from 40% to dead, the fight changes ever so slightly. Now, all of the arrows go off at the same time. So you cannot stack, which is why I preferred the whole thing of don't stack from 75 to 40%. You can, but like I prefer not to, because now if you have like two people, it's big damage. You might go downstate if you're not fully topped off. And also, you know, if you have three, you're going downstate, maybe even dead. There's a lot of, you know, the same attacks, and the attacks happen so frequently from the boss, so it's not great. Very hard to time. But in general, now becomes the tougher part of the fight. Remember I said to you that there is basically a special like AoE attack that kind of targets the furthest player, the kiter. So that can dictate where the greens kind of spawn, right? So the kiter can position themselves in such a way to put greens away from where the range group are, so that melees can go and catch these greens. Also, I believe opposite to where the kiter is when they get their red arrow or their arrow, the green arrow will spawn. The melee group need to basically be in this green. The winds will try and push you out. You need to get back into it to basically absorb this green arrow. So the kiter has responsibility. Now, obviously, you can do this multiple ways. Like I said, the first group I did, we kind of rotated. Sorry, trying to work on my angles to the camera. We rotated around in a clockwise position. And the melee group also, you know, rotated around, but they were obviously just opposite to us. And the kiter stick with us. Now, in the second group, the more like advanced group, the kiter had a special place where they were going, the range group their place, and the melee group their place. And we would just like, if the range group stuff up and charge a pylon, we all stuff basically. So it was personal responsibility. So as a pug group, think about what you want to do, or as a raid group or whatever. You can take any approach you want to, and the responsibility then is on the kiter. And that's pretty much it. I don't think I've missed anything. I know sometimes I think the melee group get little like explosives. Obviously, if you get those, don't charge the pylons. You just don't want to charge the pylons unless it's like the red one-shotter. Then you have to, you know, charge the pylon. And yeah, it's a pretty fun fight. Very high mechanical. Very hard, even if you're within like toenail distance. I think I've got wiped at like 3% before because the kiter went and did something and then they died and blah, blah, blah. So just make sure that you're taking personal responsibility, you're watching your positioning, and you bring like lots of CC. I mean, this is not really a DPS race. I know there is like an enrage timer, but if you're kind of a decent group, I don't really see that being a problem. And anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I was going to put all 3 of them on one video, but damn, it's getting flippin' long editing the first one. So I'm going to call it here for Decima. I'll put out the other one for Grand for Aura. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.